Do this right now. Stand up, walk directly into your kitchen. Open your pantry and open your refrigerator. I want you to pull out 3 specific items and place them side by side on your kitchen counter. Pull out the plastic-wrapped loaf of sliced bread. Pull out the plastic bottle of yellow cooking oil, the canola, the soybean, or the vegetable oil you use to fry your eggs, and pull out a standard bottle of modern wine. Bread, oil, wine. Put them on the counter, step back, look at them. Pay absolute, hyper-focused attention to the psychological reaction you have when you look at those 3 items. When you look at the bread, feel the immediate, culturally programmed guilt. Notice the voice in the back of your head telling you that carbohydrates are the enemy, that bread will make you fat, that gluten is toxic, and that you should be eating a lettuce wrap instead. When you look at the oil, feel the fear. Notice how you have been conditioned to believe that dietary fat is the literal sludge that clogs your arteries, causes heart attacks, and stops your blood from flowing. Notice how the modern medical, fitness, and diet industries have made you utterly, desperately terrified of the 3 most basic, fundamental food groups in the history of human civilization. You think bread causes type 2 diabetes. You think fat causes coronary artery disease. You think the only possible way to save your aging cardiovascular system is to eat a completely sterile, joyless, macro-restricted diet of boiled chicken breasts and raw broccoli. You think you know exactly how human nutrition works. But you are entirely ignoring a massive, undeniable, world-shattering historical contradiction. The ancient Romans built the greatest, most lethal, most physically dominant empire in human history. The Roman legionary marched 20 miles a day carrying 80 pounds of armor and weaponry. And their entire civilization, their entire military machine, was fueled by 3 things. The Mediterranean Triad: bread, oil, and wine. They ate massive quantities of carbohydrates. They consumed massive amounts of fat. They drank wine every single day. And the forensic evidence from their skeletons and their mummified remains across the Mediterranean proves they did not die of mass coronary artery disease, systemic obesity, or rampant metabolic syndrome. So why are your arteries clogging? Why is your blood pressure skyrocketing? Because the substances sitting on your kitchen counter are a lie. Layer 1 is the myth of the macronutrient. Modern diet culture blames the carbohydrate and it blames the fat. But human biology does not read the back of a nutrition label. Your stomach does not know what a carb is. Your biology only recognizes molecular structures. The Romans ate bread, oil, and wine. You eat bread, oil, and wine. The words are exactly the same, but on a microscopic, molecular level, the substances sitting on your kitchen counter are completely, biologically unrecognizable from the substances that powered the Roman legions. You are not eating the same food. You are eating industrial, highly processed, factory-engineered simulations of food that just happen to share the same name. And right now, across the strict disciplines of gastroenterology, lipidology, and food chemistry, I am going to show you exactly how the modern food industry took the sacred Mediterranean Triad, mutated it into a biological weapon, and destroyed your cardiovascular system in the name of mass production. Layer 2 is the bread. A Roman legionary ate roughly 1 to 2 pounds of bread every single day. It was his primary fuel source, but look at the molecular reality of that bread. The Romans grew ancient heirloom grains: emmer, einkorn, spelt. These grains grew tall and their genetic structure was complex and robust. When the Romans harvested the grain, they milled it between 2 massive grinding stones. This cold, mechanical process crushed the wheat, but it left the fibrous bran and the highly nutritious, oily germ completely intact. But the most critical step was the fermentation. The Romans did not have packets of instant yeast. To make bread rise, they used a natural sourdough starter, a living colony of wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria. They mixed the dough and left it to ferment for 24 to 48 hours. During those 2 days, a biological miracle occurred. The lactic acid bacteria literally predigested the bread. The bacteria consumed the vast majority of the sugars. They produced enzymes that broke down the complex gluten proteins into easily digestible amino acids. They completely neutralized phytic acid, unlocking the minerals in the wheat. When the Roman ate the bread, it was a slow-digesting, highly nutritious, low-glycemic structural fuel. Now, look at the plastic bag of sliced bread on your counter. It is made from modern, highly hybridized dwarf wheat, engineered in the 1960s to produce massive yields at the expense of protein complexity and soil nutrition. It is not ground on stones. It is blasted through high-speed steel roller mills that violently strip away the bran and the germ, leaving nothing behind but pure, naked white starch. And the absolute worst part, the modern food industry realized that a 24-hour sourdough fermentation was incredibly unprofitable. It took too much time. So they genetically isolated a single strain of commercial bakers' yeast designed to do only one thing: produce massive amounts of carbon dioxide gas as fast as violently possible. Modern bread is mixed, forced to rise artificially in 30 minutes, baked and bagged. Zero long fermentation, zero bacterial predigestion, zero neutralization of the phytic acid. The gluten proteins remain intact, massive, and highly inflammatory to the human gut. When you eat that modern slice of bread, the naked, unfermented starch hits your highly acidic stomach and instantly, violently converts to pure glucose. It rockets into your bloodstream. Your blood sugar spikes into the stratosphere. Your pancreas panics and dumps massive amounts of insulin. You are not eating bread. You are eating an inflammatory glucose bomb wrapped in a plastic bag. You are spiking your insulin and driving yourself toward metabolic syndrome, simply because a factory decided that 24 hours of fermentation was bad for their profit margins. Layer 3 is the fat, the oil. The Roman Empire ran on olive oil. They bathed in it, they lit their lamps with it, and they consumed massive, staggering quantities of it. The process of making it was brutally simple. You take the olive, you crush it under a massive 1,000-pound stone wheel. The mechanical pressure squeezes the liquid fat out of the fruit. This is cold pressing. Because there is no extreme heat and no chemical intervention, the resulting oil is thick, green, and incredibly rich in compounds called polyphenols, olecanthal, hydroxytyrosol. These polyphenols are some of the most powerful biologically active antioxidants on planet Earth. When they enter the human bloodstream, they actively hunt down free radicals, reduce oxidative stress, and aggressively scrub systemic inflammation out of the cardiovascular system. Roman olive oil was not just calories. It was literal cardiovascular medicine. Now look at the plastic bottle of yellow cooking oil on your counter, the vegetable oil, the canola oil, the soybean oil. You cannot squeeze a soybean under a rock and get oil. Seeds do not want to give up their fat. To extract the oil from a modern seed, the factory must subject the seeds to extreme, violent industrial processing. The seeds are crushed, heated to incredibly high temperatures, and then bathed in a highly toxic petroleum-based chemical solvent called hexane to extract the last remaining drops of fat. After extraction, the oil is gray, it smells horrific, and it is toxic. So the factory must heat it again, bleach it, and deodorize it at temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Fahrenheit just so you can tolerate the smell. Here is the devastating biological consequence. Fats are fragile molecules. The polyunsaturated fats in seed oils are incredibly unstable. When you expose them to extreme heat, pressure, and chemical solvents, the lipid molecules physically break down and oxidize. When you cook your eggs in that oil and you ingest those oxidized lipids, they travel directly into your bloodstream. Oxidized lipids are highly toxic to your endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels. They trigger a massive immune response. They cause sheer, catastrophic systemic inflammation. When your arteries become inflamed, your body attempts to patch the damage using cholesterol. The oxidized lipids literally embed themselves into the walls of your arteries, forming the exact plaque that causes heart attacks. You are drinking industrial, heavily processed, oxidized machine lubricant, and you are wondering why your heart is failing. The Romans drank cold-pressed polyphenol medicine. You blame the fat, but the macro is innocent. The industrial processing is the killer. Take a massive step back and look at the supreme, devastating arrogance of the modern food industry. They pulled off the greatest biological bait-and switch in human history. They took the sacred Mediterranean Triad, the absolute foundational pillars of human civilization, and they industrialized them entirely for profit. They realized that wild sourdough fermentation took too much time, so they invented 30-minute commercial yeast and told you that white, naked starch was enriched. They realized that growing olive trees and cold pressing the fruit was too expensive, so they grew millions of acres of cheap soybeans, used chemical solvents to strip the fat, and told you that seed oils were heart-healthy because they didn't contain saturated fat. And then, when the blood sugar of the global population skyrocketed, when obesity became an epidemic, and when coronary artery disease became the #1 killer on Earth, what did they do? They blamed the macros. They blamed the carbohydrates. They blamed the fats. They convinced an entire generation to fear bread and oil, effectively blinding the public to the actual truth, that the processing, the chemicals, the lack of fermentation, and the extreme heat were the real biological weapons. They made you fear the food to hide the factory. Layer 4 is the wine. The Romans drank wine every single day, but look at the bottle of wine on your counter. Modern commercial wine is fermented using highly specialized, alcohol-tolerant yeast strains designed to push the alcohol by volume, ABV, up to 14 or 15%. It is often loaded with residual, unfermented sugar to make it hyperpalatable. It is pumped full of added sulfites to preserve it on a grocery store shelf for years. It is a high-sugar, high-alcohol neurotoxin. When you drink it, it violently spikes your blood sugar, overwhelms your liver's ability to process toxins, and severely disrupts the architecture of your deep sleep. The Romans rarely drank wine straight. Drinking undiluted wine *marum was considered a sign of barbarism and extreme lack of discipline. The standard drink of the Roman legionary, the fuel of the working class, was a drink called Posca *. Posca was made from wine that had gone sour and turned into vinegar, which was then heavily diluted with water. Often, they mixed 1 part wine to 3 or 4 parts water. They did not drink it to get intoxicated. They drank it because the alcohol and the acidity of the vinegar killed the bacteria in the local water supply. It was a sanitation method. More importantly, because it was heavily diluted, the alcohol load on the liver was incredibly minimal. But the drink retained massive amounts of resveratrol and grape polyphenols. It provided the absolute maximum antioxidant benefit with the absolute minimum neurotoxic and glycemic load. They drank a hydrating, probiotic, polyphenol-rich tonic. You drink a 15% alcohol sugar syrup that forces your liver to shut down fat oxidation just to clear the poison from your blood. We must calibrate the science. I want you to know exactly how firmly established these mechanisms are in the medical literature, so you understand this is not a romanticization of history. The high glycemic index, the inflammatory response, and the lack of bioavailable nutrients in commercial fast yeast bread versus the low glycemic, predigested nature of true 24-hour sourdough fermentation is absolute, undisputed gastroenterology. The oxidative damage, the production of toxic aldehydes, and the endothelial inflammation caused by heat-extracted, hexane-washed seed oils is the absolute gold standard of modern lipidology and cardiovascular research. The anti-inflammatory, plaque-reducing power of cold-pressed, high-polyphenol extra virgin olive oil is the most heavily cited, heavily researched cardiovascular data on the planet. And the Roman reliance on Posca the dilution of their wine, and the use of stone-ground emmer wheat is established, peer-reviewed archaeological and historical fact. The food chemistry is real, the lipidology is real, the historical precedent is absolute. Now, stand perfectly still and recognize the sheer magnitude of the biological machinery you have been destroying every single day, and exactly what happens when you return to the ancient protocol. Think about the violent blood sugar spike of the naked, unfermented starch. Think about the oxidized, highly inflammatory seed oils embedding themselves into the walls of your arteries. Think about the massive alcohol load shutting down your liver. Imagine what happens tomorrow when you change the fuel source. You throw out the plastic bread. You go to a real bakery. You buy a loaf of heavy, dense, 24-hour fermented wild sourdough bread made from organic, stone-ground flour. You throw out the yellow plastic bottle of seed oil. You buy a dark glass bottle of cold-pressed, single-origin extra virgin olive oil. You eat the bread. The sourdough bacteria have already predigested the gluten. The phytic acid is gone. The glucose enters your bloodstream slowly. Your pancreas stays calm. Your insulin curve remains flat. You consume the olive oil. The massive dose of polyphenols enters your bloodstream. They hunt down the free radicals. They scrub the inflammation out of your endothelium. They actively protect your arteries from plaque formation. Stable blood sugar, suppressed inflammation, oxidative defense. 3 profound, intense, life-saving biological mechanisms running perfectly, simultaneously, cascading into one another to rebuild the resilience and the vascular integrity of the human machine. And all it requires is for you to stop accepting the processed, industrial, factory-engineered garbage sold to you in a plastic wrapper. Look at the 3 items on your counter: the bread, the oil, the wine. Recognize that you have been lied to. You have been told to fear the macronutrients, so you would ignore the manufacturing process. Pick up the plastic bread and the yellow seed oil. Throw them directly into the garbage. Stop fearing carbohydrates. Stop fearing dietary fat. Start fearing the factory. Start fearing the steel roller mill, the commercial yeast, the chemical solvent, and the extreme heat. Seek out the fermentation. Seek out the cold press. Seek out the ancient process. Fuel the machine with the real Mediterranean Triad. Eat like a Roman.